So hi class, I'm here with Thomas, and there's a really cool project that he's working on that's sort of future tech of things to come on screen. It involves a variable font, and maybe he can explain to us about the project and also what a variable font is at all.
Totally.
I'm not sure if everybody's heard of it or seen it, but it's really going to change the whole way we look at type one more time.
Totally agree. No, I totally agree. The first thing about what is a variable font, to answer that question, is the main distinctional point about variable font versus a traditional font is instead of being, let's for example, with weights, right? There's a regular and a bold. There's just a discrete jump. You got one or the other. There's nothing in between. That's discrete. You have discrete options basically in your font selection. Variable fonts allow for continuous. So in the weight example, you could do anything in between a regular and a bold weight, for example. Those are pretty traditional ways of thinking about the attributes of type, how they could be applied to variable fonts. The project I'm working on, Lexend, takes that idea to another level of thinking. So instead of thinking about the application of variable font attributes to a formal quality, right, of just aesthetic concern, weight or its slope, for example, or just width, tying it to some functionality that is necessary for reading. This initiated because a researcher contacted me about 2 years ago, Dr. Bonnie Schaefer-Troop, and she was working on for the last 20 years as an educational therapist on helping children to read. And she came to the hypothesis that what was hindering most of these readers was the typography, the way the type was set. And she went through an investigation to find out what typographic attributes were hindering reading and what need to be modified to help those readers read. The stats she shared with me were very shocking. The first thing I noticed was reported that the US Department of Education has said for 60 years that a reading deficiency, the people who can't read at proper reading level, is around 70% of the population. This basically means it's the struggling readers. They may stammer, they struggle, they don't read comfortably. They don't have what's called fluency. Fluency is the ability to read in a comfortable, easy manner that you're not overly thinking about it. You can think about riding a bike. When you first learned to ride a bike, it was incredibly complicated and very laborious. You know, it took a lot of effort to ride the bike. Maybe you fell off a couple times. But as you got more experience, maybe even had training wheels to help you, you gained more fluency. And you could just worry about using your bike to go to your destination. You didn't have to be so caught up in the activity of riding the bike itself and keeping your balance. Educators say the same thing for reading. Reading comprehension is the end goal, and to get there, the reader needs fluency. And for most of the educational interventions, which have been many attempts have been done for many years to try to help children read, they've not been successful because they mainly focus on a phonetic instruction solution, not the typography itself. So what Lexend does is apply a variable font technology to find optimal individual fit to typography. That's a lot of wording, so we can probably just go onto the screen to explain what this is.
So it's not just pretty, but it's also really useful.
It's effective.
Like that makes sense.
Yes. So I'm going to jump actually ahead to just explain what it is and what it does first, and then I'll go into the particulars. Our website has a study we use to show the effectiveness and how we measure fluency and things like that. So because we said the main attribute of variable fonts is a continuous property versus discrete, what Lexend does, and what the researchers found, is that hyperexpansion of the white space inside letter forms and between them increases reading proficiency when it's set to the right setting, like eyeglasses. I'm wearing eyeglasses right now, so naturally someone else has eyeglasses, but we may have the same lens, in the sense it's an eyeglass lens, but the prescription is different. So there's one solution, but there's a diversity of possibility of what works. So how does it apply to Lexend? So if you look at the screen right now, we will be seeing here the general setting for Lexend. It's standard setting. It's called Deca. As I move this cursor, this scroll bar, what we're seeing here is the type both in a large setting increasing in size, but also the paragraph setting on the right side of the screen increasing as well. The spaces inside and between the letter forms are increasing. The actual code that's actually changing this is below in that variable font setting for CSS. It's just one CSS line. It's the font variation setting Lexend. And it goes from 0, which has no amplification, to a maximum of 100. So notice in the past, we would have to have set just discrete movements, right? So we'd have like 7 different settings of Lexend and very discrete jumps. This allows a student to be found their ideal setting. Maybe they need something between, instead of say something between 50, and 65, maybe this person needs something in between. In the past, before variable fonts, we couldn't give that student that solution. It would be impossible. Now we can. We can easily find anything between the intervals of 50 and 65 in this case. So this allows for a much more fine-grained typography in the reading experience. And in terms of the effectiveness of this model, we have a study to prove it. We had a sample of 19 students reading samples of text, 1 in Times New Roman into control, and different intensities of Lexend settings. And 17 out of 19 did better with Lexend as a series versus Times New Roman. Now it's with an average improvement of about 20%, 19.8% improvement.
That's a lot.
In just changing the font. It's literally no different than me going from near vision without my glasses to with my glasses. Because the issue is perceptual first and then cognition and reading. While educators have been mostly focusing purely on cognition, not taking for granted the thing they thought was so apparent.
Not just for people learning to read text at all, but maybe also a foreign language.
Yes, anytime.
Or when we're driving, when we're tired, or there could be a lot more.
There's a lot of applications. Now, in terms of reading fluency itself, it is true that there's a perceptual side and there's language side, right? And a big thing is that children, if they don't learn how to read, they can't even access the language comprehension side.
Right.
So
they're so focused on the reading, they don't understand.
They can't. They have to comprehend. So this actually does have serious implications in the starting education, like basically K through 3. But yes, you're absolutely correct that this does have usefulness in all applications. We definitely see a possibility down the road where, in your iPhone, you're basically going out, your screen changes based on the lightness of the room, right? It gets brighter or dimmer based on if you're in the sun or not.
Yeah.
We're seeing a similar possibility for this kind of typographic environment. Imagine you're reading on your email text.
Yeah.
And you're noticing the camera is noticing you're straining because you're fatigued, as you said.
And you're on a shaky subway and
there's stressors. Basically, there's stressors of some kind. That's the basic understanding. There's stressors in your environment that's hindering your reading fluency. This could find the optimal fit to you as an individual for your setting of reading. And the only thing that's changing is the spacing inside between letter forms. It's really the combination of those 2 factors that is particular to you and what you need. And it changes based on your needs and demands at the time.
Do you think people would be freaked out when the type changes all of a sudden?
It might be so subtle. It might be so subtle you don't even know.
Yeah.
And most likely, there's probably a certain range you need.
Yeah.
So probably the first time it'd be a diagnosis test. You'd be diagnosed, basically.
Right.
And
you can set it.
You would set it,
Yeah.
and then over the course of a day or different lighting environments, it probably just change. It would just change very subtly. It would be very subtle. So only people really focus attention would actually notice the differences.
So at night, you might be reading a book, you're getting a little tired, you want to dial up that a little bit, make it easier to read.
Exactly.
How are variable fonts made?
So they're made pretty traditionally in normal typefaces. They operate. You're generally drawing as you would normal fonts. The main distinction is what you output as. The output is different versus just an OTF file. That's usually what we do for normal traditional fonts. For example, you'll know you're dealing with a variable font because a normal font would have, say, for different weights. Or for Lexend, for example. Lexend does actually come with static named instances. They do exist, 7 of them. So as a traditional font, it would be 7 fonts, right? But as a variable font, it's 1 font. So it actually packages up all the discrete 7 items into 1. So in terms of how they're made, they're designed basically the same way, but the output is different. In the old mode, it would be discrete 7, 20, 32 fonts for different weights or styles. In variable fonts, it's much less. There probably still is, actually no there is. There is usually italic is sometimes separated from Roman still.
Right.
But that's not always the case. Sometimes they are included together.
And they're all in a WOFF2 format. That's what you're loading at.
So besides being a WAV file for web users, for desktop publishing purposes, it's most likely a TrueType file. And
it's also already available on Google, which is we can already start using it.
Yes. There are a lot of on Google Fonts. There is a set of fonts. Actually, one of my fonts I worked on, Quicksand, is one of them. That is a variable font available for use. You can use right now. And also Lexend itself is a variable font as well. that we're hoping to be that the static fonts are already on Google. The variable font is waiting for Google just to publish it, and we're good to go.
And do you have a website? I'm gonna post the URL for it. And do you have a newsletter that you send out with always updates about the latest development of this project? It's really interesting. I read like through the first couple months now, and it's exciting to see that you're still building on this project.
It's a big project. We have a lot to work on. So yes, we have Lexend.com. We have a newsletter you can sign up for. You'll learn about reading proficiency, cognition, how typography interacts with all those. So there's a lot of great information and updates on our future projects. We're currently exploring Arabic, using the system for Arabic, as well as more research to show empirical demonstrated effectiveness. For example, using fMRI scans or pupil dilation to show effectiveness of increasing fluency through typographic factors. So research and more development of fonts and raising more partners. So helping building apps so that we can get this in front of teachers and educators so that children and people can actually, change the way they read.
Yeah, it's exciting that all this is already available on Google. So thank you so much that we can already start using this font for free for everybody. It's really going to improve. And I'd like to go to the Lexend.com website and check out the newsletter. And thank you so much for introducing us to this new technology of variable fonts.
It's a pleasure. And thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it.